Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. Hey, Godspeed to the folks in Texas. Godspeed to the folks in Texas. I have been away for a week of almost feeling guilty. Just had a wonderful week of vacation that extended into the July 4th weekend. And then to be monitoring all of the tragedy in Texas and to be thinking about those kids, it's just a heartbreak. It is a heartbreak. And we have to talk about it because I think it's appropriate to ask today's poll question, which is whether the tragic loss of life in the Texas storm was it preventable or was it an unavoidable consequence of sudden extreme weather? Probably mixtures of both, right? But let me frame that for you a little bit better in just a moment. First, thank you to my friends at Parks Casino in the burbs of Philadelphia, but close to all of New Jersey, close to New York, close to wherever you might be in Delaware. Plenty of summer still ahead. We're moving along, but plenty of summer still ahead. And there's a lot of great entertainment that is coming to Parks Casino that I recommend. Toward the end of summer, UB40 will be at Parks Casino, the Australian Pink Floyd show, the 50th anniversary of the Wish You Were Here release. Amazing. I saw that everything old is new again. Since I've been with all of you, Oasis reunited and Black Sabbath did their absolute final set. I think Ozzy was good for just 20 minutes, but God bless him. I mean, at his age and with Parkinson's to perform, I thought was amazing. The Revivalists, roots rock with a modern twist. The tour is called All in the Family, 10 Years of Men Amongst Mountains. Kansas, the Psychedelic Furs with guest Gary Newman. Everclear, the Sparkle and Fade 30th Anniversary Tour. Almost Queen, a tribute to Queen. And of course, Bill Murray is coming for one night only. Tickets for all of these shows available at Parks, P-A-R-X, casino.com. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Thinking, by the way, of Parks Casino and thinking of the Texas tragedy, this just popped into my head. 2 years ago, almost to today, 2 years ago, almost to today, it was mid-July of the summer of 2023. And I have a distinct recollection, again, thinking of Parks, and Parks is in Bucks County. I was in Bucks County that day. And I was looking forward to going to see Peter Frampton perform, not at Parks, but in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, not far from Lehigh, where I did my undergraduate work. I know you're wondering, Michael, why in the context of this unspeakable tragedy in Texas are you telling us about going to see a Peter Frampton show? I'll tell you why. Because I was going to pick up my son-in-law for that show, and rain was in the forecast. A thunderstorm was in the forecast. But over the span of 45 minutes, as the crow flies, probably 3 miles from my point of departure, Upper Makefield Township, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, 7 inches of rain. You can fact check me on this. 7 inches of rain fell in under an hour. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Like nothing I'd ever seen. I remember my driveway washed out. That was the worst of it for us. Our driveway washed out, a gravel driveway washed out. And within 5 miles, as the crow flies, a mother and her 2 children. I'm forgetting how many died, 7, 8. I don't think it was more than that, but I remember there were 2 kids and one was an infant. And they were not from the area, but the community was just horrified. And I just remember being so shocked at the way the skies had opened and this had seemingly come out of nowhere. And the same thing just happened in Texas. But I guess to my point and the poll question today, how many times does it have to happen before you say we are living in a new era? And we need to be vigilant as citizens, and government at all levels needs to be vigilant and prepared as well, because the rules have changed. And yeah, I regard it as an act of God, but I regard it as an act of God now in the context of, acts of man, because I'm a believer in climate change and the extreme weather. Before I went on vacation 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, massive storm. We were knocked out of power for 4 straight days at my house. And you're like, oh, okay, Michael, you're conflating weather now with climate change. No, I'm making comments about extreme weather. Is it the Madre fire that's been burning? Europe has been in a heat wave, and now here we are with at least 82 dead in Texas. And I think the number, I always am reluctant to talk about the numbers, but I think that the number of those who are missing is about a dozen. I'm looking at the front page of today's New York Post. Edge of danger, edge of danger. And within the coverage of the Post is a map showing Camp Mystic and showing the proximity of the river to those cabins, 225 feet. For the benefit of those who are not only listening, but watching me on YouTube, there's a map in the Post today, 225 feet separated the junior cabins, the junior campers in the so-called lowlands of this area. So there's plenty of time coming for assessment. I felt it appropriate to post the poll question that I did today because already the blame game has begun. On today's radio program, the best guest, I think, to address what exactly were the work shortages and what were the human aspects of this. Christopher Flavelle from the New York Times writes about the National Weather Service and has since 2019, and he'll be a guest on today's radio program in the second hour. And here's the lead of his Times coverage that I'm eager to have him expand upon. Crucial positions at the local offices of the National Weather Service were unfilled as severe rainfall inundated parts of central Texas on Friday morning, prompting some experts to question whether staffing shortages made it harder for the forecasting agency to coordinate with the local emergency managers as floodwaters rose. Texas officials appeared to blame the Weather Service for issuing forecasts on Wednesday that underestimated how much rain was coming. That's what reminds me of 2 years ago in Bucks County. But former Weather Service officials said the forecasts were as good as could be expected given the enormous levels of rainfall and the storm's unusually abrupt escalation. And then further along in the story, it talks about exactly what vacancies existed. Here, let me tell you. The National Weather Service's San Angelo office, which is responsible for some of the areas hit hardest by Friday's flooding, was missing a senior hydrologist, staff forecaster, and meteorologist in charge. Further along in the story, the Weather Service's nearby San Antonio office, which covers other areas hit by the floods, also had significant vacancies, including a warning coordination meteorologist and science officer. And I know that some who don't respect, don't like, don't appreciate, are critics of President Trump want to point a finger in his direction. And I'm not dismissing those criticisms. I'm not dismissing those criticisms, not in an era where there have been so many government cutbacks and a failure on the part of the administration to acknowledge the peril of climate change. I don't even think the president uses those words. So I think it's a legitimate question. And on specifically the staffing levels in the Trump era, this piece from my guest, Christopher Flavelle, says some of the openings may predate the current Trump administration. But at both offices, the offices that I just referenced, the vacancy rate is roughly double what it was when Trump returned to the White House in January. And there's much more to the story. And I think what's fair to say is there was certainly no sense of urgency on the part of the administration to fill these type of positions. The comments that are appended to the Times piece that I find among all those that I read, and I read a number of them yesterday and last night, the comments are really interesting and thoughtful, and I think worthy of just a few references. So, for example, one individual says, reading about this tragedy, I can't help thinking why such a large camp is located so close to a river that in the last 100 years have experienced very severe flash floods almost of the same intensity. And previously, it happened in July, as it did this time. As a hydraulic engineer with experience in extreme statistics of water levels and flow discharge, I wonder what a proper statistics of available data coupled with sound judgment from meteorologists and experts in river hydraulics would reveal. Even if this, after proper analysis, turns out to be a so-called 100 years flood event, there's a 1% probability for it to occur in each season, which would be a very high risk for a camp with so many children. I know hindsight is 2020, but that made a lot of sense to me. There was more to it. Someone else says the recent tragic deaths resulting from severe weather events are heartbreaking and to a large degree preventable. While nature's power can never be fully tamed, the human cost might have been reduced had the current administration not forced and encouraged staffing cuts at the National Weather Service in an era when climate-related disasters are becoming more frequent and more intense. It is deeply irresponsible to undermine the very agencies tasked with forecasting and responding to such events. I can't argue with that either. Here for a little balance, just one more, a third comment to the Flavel piece in the Times, and I'm looking forward to chatting with him today about it on radio. This individual, I am a former Weather Service employee and at one time a science officer for the organization. My role was to help train forecasters using the latest research in forecasting extreme weather. These types of organized, small-scale thunderstorms are so difficult to forecast given the widely spaced grid of surface weather stations and upper air balloon network that we have in place. Even today, there are massive gaps in that upper air balloon network. Those gaps are missing vital information about the temperature, wind, and moisture content through the depth of the atmosphere. This person sounds like they know what they're talking about, right? The missing data from these gaps do not make it into the latest computer models that forecasters rely on. So small scale weather systems that forecasters might have seen given a more spatially dense upper air and surface network are undetected. Believe me, weather forecasters want to get it right. They want to get it right. We study this. We train for this. We hate missing events like this. Unfortunately, this horrific event will haunt those forecasters on duty that night. We as a society have to stop blaming forecasters. I'm not blaming the forecasters. I'm questioning whether the forecasters, given the extreme weather that is now part and parcel of all of our daily lives, have been given the tools that they require. And I'm convinced that the answer is no, and that we've not done all that we need to do when we're not even acknowledging the presence, of climate change. So was the tragic loss of life in the Texas storm preventable? I think it was. Not all of it, but I think certain of it certainly was. Or your alternative, was it an unavoidable consequence of sudden extreme weather? I know that there will probably be nearly 30,000 votes cast on this poll question today. You might be interested to know that when I signed in, I was voter number 30. And when there were only 30 votes on this, 56.67%, like yours truly, were going with preventable. One more thing. I have to say that in terms of how nasty the conversation has become already. Headline from Mediaite: Texas pediatrician suspended and removed over viral flood rant, hoping MAGA residents, quote, get what they voted for. A Texas pediatrician has been placed on leave and disavowed by her employers after a viral social media post about the state's deadly flood disaster sparked outrage and even drew the attention of the Texas Medical Board. Dr. Christina B. Probst came under fire over a now deleted social media post. Yeah, I mean, quite tone deaf, about this tragedy and deadly flooding in Texas, which has left at least 79 dead, including at least 28 children. further along. In a now deleted post that was shared by screenshots on X, nothing's ever gone, under her old Facebook name, Christina, wrote about the flooding and expressed apparent ill will toward MAGA voters in affected areas. Quote, may all visitors, children, non-MAGA voters, and pets be safe and dry. Care County MAGA voted to gut FEMA. They deny climate change. May they get what they voted for. Bless their hearts. Well, I think that's twisted. It's sad and it's a horrible, horrible tragedy. And think of those kids because I'm sure they never took a position on climate change, okay, regardless of how their parents may have voted. So I'm back from vacation. It's a depressing story. It's an important story. I'll talk about it on radio today, but please make sure that you are going to smerconish.com and weighing in on all of this as best we can, knowing what we know at this moment in time. I've got the best guest teed up who'll talk to us about the timeline, what was known, what was distributed, and how much of this could have been averted. You weren't going to stop the flooding. You weren't going to stop the rain, but perhaps better preparedness and more staffing could have kept some people out of harm's way. Please go vote at smerconish.com on the poll question. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Set yourself up for notifications so that when I'm speaking, you'll at least be aware of the opportunity to tune in and watch. Okay? Thank you, gang. I'll see you again soon.